Hi, I'm Jenny Miller of Let's Get Sewing. Are you ready to take the fear and frustration out of your sewing experience and finally get sewing? Then you're in the right place. Be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any of my tips and tutorials. And check out the caption too. There's a link to my website where you can find out more about my course, Conquer Your Sewing Machine, and future courses that I have coming. And now, let's get sewing. Today, I want to talk about pattern envelopes. There is a lot of information on the outside of a pattern that will help you not only select the correct pattern, but get the right size, the right fabrics, everything you need. But each manufacturer does things a little bit differently. So I want to kind of explain it to you. I'm going to show you a couple of commercial patterns, a couple of indie patterns, so that you can kind of get a feel for what information is on the envelope and what that looks like and what it's telling you. So let's take a closer look at these pattern envelopes. So to start out here, we're looking at our commercial patterns. And of course, we have the brand name on the front. And then you have these numbers, which you may be familiar with when you're purchasing a commercial pattern. Typically, you look through a catalog, find a picture that you like, match the number, go to the drawer and find the number pattern that you want. But another thing you need to look at is the size here on the front, because often the manufacturers will make one pattern for larger sizes, one for smaller sizes. And that's mostly just to save paper, because you've got so many lines. If you have all of the sizes together, it doesn't always fit well onto their pattern paper. So they will divide them up between sizes. So for instance, this one has 14, 16, 18, 20, and 22. But if you need the smaller women's sizes, then you would find the pattern that maybe had 6, 8, 10, and 12. So that is one thing that you're looking for on the pattern. In this case, it's giving us the European sizes and the American sizes. Of course, this is a child's pattern, sizes 2 through 7 in this one. Another thing that you're going to find on the front of the patterns very often are different letters here. And each of those letters corresponds to the view or the version of the pattern. So for instance, in this one, view C is the vest, which the vest pattern is in here. It also includes view D, which is the skirt. So you'll see here that the skirt is the same, but then there's a variation on the skirt, which is view E, and there's a variation where the vest becomes a jacket, which is view A. So as you're going through the instructions, you're going to look for the view that you are doing, and the instructions will be separate, or they'll tell you for view A, do this, but for view C, do that. So you need to be aware of which version of the pattern you are making. One last thing that you might find on the front of these envelopes is the difficulty level. So this is super easy, according to them, and it is a fairly easy pattern. So look for things like that, or quick and easy, or quick sew. Things like that will tell you whether this pattern may or may not be in your difficulty level. Now this one does not say, and so there are a few other clues that we can look at. So I've turned this over to the back on this pattern and not on this pattern because I want to look at these drawings here. These are called the flat drawings, and this is the designer's very simple drawing of what the garment is going to look like with very simple details. And so this is going to tell you more about the pattern. For instance, if this skirt were to have maybe a zipper in it somewhere, you wouldn't see it from this picture or from these pictures. You know, if it had a zipper in the side or the back, you wouldn't know. But if you looked at these flat drawings here, it would show you if there was a zipper there or not. It's also going to show you, it's hard to tell from these what kind of sleeve it is, but from the flat drawing, you can see that it's a raglan sleeve, which is a little more simple and might help you decide whether or not that's a pattern you think you can tackle. So take a look at the flat drawings and see if that is something that you want to tackle or not, if you feel like it's within your difficulty range. I also would not let that discourage you from a pattern, just something to be aware of before you start the project. The next thing that you need to know before or when you're purchasing your pattern is how much fabric you're going to need for that particular pattern. So first of all, you have to find the view that you're doing. In this case, it was pretty simple. There was just A, B, or C. If you have 45-inch fabric, you're looking at this chart. If you have the wider 55 to 60-inch fabric, you're looking at this chart, because the wider the fabric, the less you might need, because the pattern pieces can be configured a little more compactly. So you're going to come across and find your size. So in this case, if I was making the child size 4 and I had 45-inch fabric, I would need 1¼ yards. This one's a little more complex, but that's okay. Let's say that we're making a size 12 and we want to make that vest that we saw on the front, which is view C. So in that case, with the 45-inch fabric, we would need 1½ yards. With the 60-inch fabric, 1¼ yards. So just a little bit less when you get the wider fabric. But that's how you read how much fabric you're going to need for your pattern. Now, children's patterns are not nearly, their bodies are not nearly as complex as adult bodies. So they do not have a size chart on here. You pretty much know what your child's size is for the most part, although you might need to look at the pattern pieces first to make sure that they're going to fit your particular child. When it comes to the adult patterns, it gets much more complex. You need to know your bust, waist, and or hip measurements. In this case, you need to know your hip measurement because of the skirt. So in order to figure that out, on this particular pattern, they have put the chart on the flap. So if you're in the store, you may have to pull out this flap to figure out what size you're going to need. So in this case, if your bust is 34, your waist is 26½, and your hip is 36, you're going to need a size 12. This one also gets your back waist length, which is the distance from kind of the top of the jacket down to the waist. And so in this case, for the size 12, that would be 16¾ inches. So you look at your measurements and that will determine the size. These sizes have absolutely nothing to do with the size you would wear in ready-to-wear clothing. So throw that out the window. Some people are very offended that they could be a size 10 in this, in regular ready-to-wear clothing, and when they go to make this pattern, suddenly they're a size 14. Don't worry about that. It means absolutely nothing, except that this designer says that a size 14 is 36, 36, 28, 38. So that's all that means. Also, on the back of the fabric, or back of the pattern, we have the suggested fabric. So for views A, B, C, and D, you could use wool types, cotton types, or gabardine. A, B, and C would also be good in leather or faux suede. If you're making view E, which is this skirt down here at the bottom, they suggest a jacquard, a crepe de chine, or silk types. You also need some lightweight fusible interfacing. So you need to know all of those things when purchasing your fabric. I'm sorry, when purchasing your pattern. I don't know why I keep saying fabric. You also have here a list of the notions. So if you're making this jacket view A, you need 6 1/4-inch buttons. If you are making view D or E, you need 1 18-centimeter zipper and 1¼ yards of twill tape. So that's something to be aware of too, the notions that you need for the pattern. Now let's take a look at our indie patterns, because each of these can be very different depending on the designer. Your commercial patterns are a little more standardized, mostly because they're all owned by one company at this point, but you're still going to get the information you need from the outside of the envelope. So in this particular pattern, they have all the sizes from 0 to 20 in this pattern. It tells you right there on the front. It shows you the two different views. It doesn't label them A and B here, but it shows you that it's a tunic and a dress, and you can do both lengths. This one also has the sizes 00 through 20, and it gives us an indication here that this is for a confident beginner. Maybe you've sewn a few things, you're feeling good about it, you're ready to move on to something a little bit more complicated. So that all of that information is on here. Of course, the brand names are also on the front of it. I forgot to start with that. But all of that information is on the front of these patterns. Now, these tend to be, usually when you buy an indie pattern, it's something like this, where yes, there are two views, but it's just a longer version of the same top. Most indie designers don't tend to put a whole bunch of different patterns into one. They would sell one pattern that was the vest and jacket and one that was the two views of the skirt. Just as a general rule, that's how most of them design their patterns. But when we flip over to the back here, we get some more information. And I like this right here. On both of these, they have given a description of what the pattern is kind of supposed to look like by the time you're done. So there's some more information. If you're feeling intimidated by maybe a front placket or the box pleat, then maybe that tells you something about some more about the pattern. This one also gives the difficulty 2 scissors out of 4. So that might give you a little more information. Again, we have the suggested fabrics on both of them. The notions are on here. They're called sundries. And this one even gives you what tools you're going to need. Fabric, scissors, iron, ironing board, straight pins, tailor's chalk. Even that you're going to need a hand sewing needle, which is good to know. And then, of course, we have the guide. So we have the sizes, and you're going to find this one takes your high bust measurement, your waist and hip measurement. So you're going to find them on the chart and find what size you are. Then this chart here tells you, and this chart here, you find your size, and it will tell you how much fabric that you need for your particular size. One thing I like that a lot of indie designers will put on here, you see it sometimes on the commercial patterns, but not very often, they will give the finished garment measurements. If they give them in a commercial pattern, I find more often than not they're on the instructions inside. So you might pull that out and take a look at it when you're buying the pattern as well. But the finished garment measurements are going to tell you a lot, because let's say you think you're a size 8 or maybe a size 10. Well, look here and see the size 8 in the bust is 46. The size 10 is 47.5. Yeah, that's going to be big enough to fit around your bust. Or no, maybe you're going to need to go up a little bit bigger. It's going to tell you what it's going to measure when it's done, so you know for sure whether that is going to fit around your body. So that is the indie patterns, a couple of examples of indie patterns, and the information on the envelope. So that was a lot of information, but that's because there is a lot of information on the outside of the envelope that will help you when choosing the right pattern, the right size pattern, the right fabrics and notions for your pattern to get you started off on the right foot so that you're much more confident in your sewing project. Now, if you're still feeling unsure, how do I measure my body? What happens when my measurements don't match exactly what the pattern says? I have a masterclass coming up called Decode Your Size, how to measure your body accurately and then translate those measurements into the correct pattern size. Not only that, but what do I do when my measurements fall between 2 different sizes? So if these are questions that you've had, I would love for you to join me in the masterclass. It's October 1st or 2nd. You can do either one. I'll be repeating the same thing twice so that you can find one that fits your schedule. So I would love to have you join me in that masterclass. I'll put the link and information in the description. And now, let's get sewing. Thank you for joining me today. My goal is to take the frustration out of your sewing experience, and so I hope my tips are helpful. Feel free to comment with any questions or ideas you may have. I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. Now, let's get sewing.